Good afternoon, and welcome to the Napa Valley Wine Academy's WSET Level 3 Wines Student Panel Discussion. I'm Jess Helfand, one of Napa Valley Wine Academy's Level 3 instructors, and I'm joined today by four of my former students. I'm excited to talk about their experiences with the course, their study habits, the exam, as well as any other nuggets of wisdom that they have to share with you. We'll have time at the end to talk through any questions that you have, that you and our audience have about what Level 3 really entails. So please feel free to use the Q&A feature that we have on Zoom. We also have Catherine Bouguet, our Vice President of Education, in the live chat on Zoom, and Serena Chan, our Head of Social Media, live and chat on Facebook and YouTube. A recording of today's session will also be posted in our membership platform and available for on-demand viewing. So without further ado, let's bring out the panel. Hello, everyone. We have joining us today Charlie Bornasian, Rebecca Cedar, Jyoti Kataria, and Elliot Porter. Before we dive in, I would love for each of you to do a quick introduction. Rebecca, do you mind starting us off?
Sure. I'm Rebecca Cedar, and I live on the central coast of California in between the Paso Robles AVA and the newly minted San Luis Obispo Coast AVA. I finished my level 3 last August, and I work part-time in the wine industry for a couple of wineries here in the area doing marketing, events, and I help out at Harvest a bit too.
Fantastic. Thank you. Elliot?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elliot Porter. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm not in the industry. I just like wine a lot. I completed the level 3 course in October of this past year. Previously, I had done the sommelier or the introductory sommelier course with CMS.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie Bernasian. I'm from the Orlando, Florida area. I am not in the wine industry. My full-time career and career love and lifetime life work is insurance and risk management. So I do love wine. I'm a fellow wine lover and finished my level 3 in the fourth quarter of 2022.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Jody, round us out.
Hi, my name is Jyoti Kataria. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I work for a major wine distributor here in the Great Lakes area. We sell a lot of beer and wine and NA. I started my level 1 back in 2018. I met my boss while I was giving my WSET Level 2 exams. He was visiting in California at that time, and we just met up at a friend's house. And I did my level 3 during COVID, which was very interesting. Passed my level 3 in 2021.
Excellent. Thank you. I love how WSET changed your career journey there. That's amazing.
Oh, completely.
So when we begin a level 3 class, I always start by telling our students that it's hard, right? This is a challenging test. There will be both a tasting component as well as a written component to the exam. We spend about 10 weeks together as a class, but most students will certainly want to spend more than that as they prepare for their exam day. With that, Rebecca, my first question is to you. How would you describe the jump from level 2 to level 3, particularly for someone who's new to the industry?
Yes, and I was brand new to the industry when I started this process, and it was during COVID as well. I started with level 1 and cruised through that pretty easily, and level 2 as well was great and didn't put up too much challenge for me. But then level 3, for me, I really felt like I underestimated the time commitment that I needed to put into the course. And I think now there's a pretest possibly available. I'm not sure it was available when I was going through, but definitely would recommend taking that just to gauge. Sorry about the dog, guys.
No worries.
Just to get a baseline reference for where you are.
Yeah,
So it
we do
is.
have that. We do have that exam. It's a voluntary exam where it's just like a self-done multiple choice to see where your knowledge lies, and how much of a jump it's going to be to some of the level topics.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So it is significant. But if, the main thing for me was just considering the amount of time that I needed to spend with the
Sure,
course, for sure.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's a much bigger investment,
Than
much
you
bigger
originally thought
investment.
it might be. Yeah,
Yes, for
yeah,
sure.
I
Yeah.
feel that. So,
Mhm.
Jody, since you were with a distributor at the time that you did level three, did you have a similar experience with feeling like it was a really big jump?
I absolutely echo her thoughts. To be honest with you, it was. I underestimated it significantly. I thought, oh, I passed level two. It's going to be easy. I've been tasting wine every day at work, and it's not going to be that bad. But first of all, I started off during COVID. It was a very strange year, and on premise and off premise was completely in a different arena at that time. I was working 40 to 50 hours and then doing this course while raising a small human with my partner. So it was a lot of stuff on my plate at the same time. I am pretty sad about future students have the possibility of being able to test and see where they stand. We didn't have that back in the day. I just walked in with overconfidence and I got scared. I remember calling you on the phone and being like, Jess, I don't know what I got myself into.
I remember that conversation, but it all worked out, right? It's just
Yeah, it all
one
worked
piece at a
out.
time, right? One step at a
Yeah,
time.
as long as you have like really good tasting group, your core group, it'll take you places. It's really important to
Excellent.
find one.
I love that segue into tasting. We're definitely going to talk a lot about theory, but I wanted to kind of start off with tasting. In my experience, students are often really worried about the tasting in particular because it's the new part. It's something we haven't done before. In an exam situation, even though theory tends to be where more of the hiccups lie, which we'll talk about later. Elliot, I'm going to jump to you. What was your experience with the tasting portion? Somebody who, if you don't mind me sharing, got distinction on his tasting.
Yeah, so the nice thing about the tasting is it's very structured, and so when you enter into it, it can be really intimidating thinking of like looking at wine notes and other things that you read about wines. But there is a structure to it. You think you're introduced to it in level two, but the thing I think initially caught me off guard was you don't get the tasting sheet when you go into the exam, so you do need to mentally prepare of how you walk yourself through a tasting note for the exam. And so learning the acronyms, understanding where the points are, understanding the strategies associated with it were really important. And after you kind of got that down, it really became a lot less intimidating. And during the course, we did have a lot of time where we talked about tasting strategy. A lot of the homeworks were tasting notes that you got feedback on. And after you start to get that feedback, you feel a little bit more comfortable, especially with hitting that, pass level.
That's excellent. Yeah. The graded homeworks that we give back to you, they are a labor of love because they take so long to do, but I'm really glad that they pay off for you. That's wonderful to hear. You mentioned an acronym. So was that for like sweetness, acid, tannin, et cetera? Or did you have other, I don't know, mnemonic devices or something else that you used?
Yeah, it was that one, and then it was Blick, balance. Now I'm forgetting balance, length, intensity, and complexity. Which is how you have to rate the quality of the wine when you have to make a decision at the end.
Very good. Did you have any specific tasting practices? I remember when we were chatting, you mentioned that if you were just tasting a wine casually at home, you would still write a note, or if you were out, you would just kind of do it in your head as you were tasting.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is moving from just drinking wine whenever you're having wine to thinking about it. And so, even just sitting down for 5 minutes and not checking it against anything, but like, did I remember all of the components? Did I remember all of the points? And then coming up with some sort of consistency in your head in terms of where you're rating these on the scale was really helpful. And then as you move through the tasting process as a part of the class, you can kind of compare where you're at with what the feedback is that you're getting on the tasting notes to see if you need to adjust a little bit. So if you think, something is always like medium plus acid, but it's high acid, maybe you need to rethink that when you're doing your tasting note.
All those calibration issues, absolutely, absolutely. Charlie, if I jump over to you for a moment, if I recall, you had a tasting group. Was that with people that were also in the class or just friends? Was it local? Was it virtual?
It was people that were in the level 3 class, and it was virtual. And
Mhm.
it was something that I really looked forward to. The other members of the group were very good. We shared ideas, we shared thoughts, and I could honestly tell you, I'm a better taster uh, for spending time with both Steve and Carrie, and just sharing ideas, sharing notes, sharing different aspects. It's almost like it's that synergy effect in the group
Absolutely.
where where the group, you write down certain things, and then the group eventually, if they're all unselfishly sharing ideas, is going to come to the best kind of answer.
Absolutely. It's so helpful when you're nosing something and you can't quite put your finger on it and somebody else in the room or the Zoom suite says, "Oh, well that's dried thyme, obviously." And like, "Oh, well of course that's what that is." So tasting with a group is always super helpful with that. Excellent. Jody, you had a tasting group too that was also virtual.
Yes,
Uh,
and I am a better taster because of them. Our whole class, because it was a Zoom class, the whole class was tasting together while the class lasted. But once we were done with our class, the tasting group concentrated to Ivy and Yana. And three of
mhm.
us, we did our exam together too. I saw more of them than I think my those few months. We would meet up 2 or 3 times a week, even if it was for 30 minutes, just to taste something. We made sure Ivy was in California, Yana is in New York, I'm in Michigan. So we had to find wines from wine.com because they have two different warehouses and make sure they were vintage specific, the exact same wines that we could get from a place and still taste together. And
Absolutely.
that really um, they help me in so many significant ways in terms of pinpointing certain things that I was not able to pick up, but they did, or vice versa for that matter, and even theory part of it. Yana is a
Absolutely.
professor, so she wrote down the whole thing for us.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that because I definitely want to talk about study strategies overall and putting together a study plan because I think that's such a valuable thing. And I'm so glad you had that resource with your group. That's just fantastic. Rebecca, I'm going to come back to you for one couple of final tasting questions here. When we've talked about tasting, I remember you saying that you were like religiously following the SAT, which I just loved.
Yeah.
Was there anything you did in particular to memorize? Did you have an
Yes.
acronym like Elliot did?
I definitely did the acronym, but one thing I want to say, first of all, is that especially if you've been in the industry and you're used to describing wines, it's very crucial that you memorize that SAT sheet because it's a script more or less, and you don't want to go off script. You won't get points for descriptors that are not on there. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And I carried that card with me wherever I went, along with the wine journal, and just practiced that structure with every single tasting I did. And then also, I taught friends, like, this is how you taste wine. So, kind of took them through it so that they could understand the structure. And again, teaching other people is really valuable because if you can't teach it, you probably don't know it.
You don't, yeah.
So,
If you can't explain it to somebody, you don't actually understand it yourself, right?
yeah, because and again on the test you've got the time factor as well. So you need to be able to very succinctly and very quickly formulate that SAT and get it on paper, with a lot of ease and proficiency. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. So that's kind of tasting in a nutshell, right? Follow the SAT, practice, Calibrate with your instructor, have a tasting group if that works for you. It always will help. It's certainly not obligatory, but it makes it more fun if you're doing it with more people too. But then you'll be fine, right? This is not the hard part. The hard part, if I may, is going to be our theory. Okay. And theory consists of two parts, right? Our 50 multiple choice questions and our 4 short written answer questions, or SWAs. The SWAs are the hard part, right? Each multiple choice question is worth 25, excuse me, each multi part written question is worth 25 marks. I've always thought that, yes, of course, the facts are important, but you have to be able to connect the facts with the place, with the style of the wine. And why does this wine taste the way it does? What happened in the vineyard and the winery that makes it this way? And it's tough to make those connections, to think through it start to finish, right? Elliot, I'm going to jump back to you again to start our theory discussion. You did a few things in preparation that I thought were especially interesting. Can you tell us about the lists of the 10 factors that you made in the vineyard and winery? I think we have a picture of that.
Yeah, sure. So when I was taking practice tests, one of the things that I noticed was I would go back to like specific concepts and I would leave out a bunch of other ones. And so what I did was I prepared 10 grape growing terms and 10 winemaking terms, especially focused on the ones that I tended to like gloss over when I was doing short written answers. And so memorize them, ready to go, put them down on my scratch paper when I got in the room. And then when I was doing the short written answer questions and kind of counting to see, how many points I thought I had for a specific question, if I was short, I could go to the list and be like, oh, did I consider, hazards or the altitude or, where this is located, proximity to water, things like that to help me I guess, find some other points to eke out and include in my answer.
That's fantastic. I really liked this approach and just having like a quick little, like we don't have time to write a draft of a question, but we do have time to write a quick little note to ourselves to make sure we're not forgetting anything essential. I think that's fantastic. And you were talking about the number of points that were there. And for those who haven't seen a level 3 mock exam or an exam, for each question, it tells you how many marks are available. So this is, I think, an excellent method to see, okay, did I have enough content in my question in my answer that relates back to that specific question and that specific idea. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think you also commented on spending extra time on sparkling and fortified. Is that right?
Yeah, so one of the things that they break out for you is how many points each part of the exam is worth. And so you know that you're going to get a question on sparkling, you know that you're going to get a question on fortified, and I think total in the actual book is like 25 pages. So
Yeah,
it's
it's very.
about 10% of what you're looking at, and you're guaranteed to get like, I don't know, 25 points or something like that. So in terms of like knowing something forward and backwards walking into the test, if you can focus on anything, focus on those two because it'll get you so many of the points that you need to get close to passing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fortified muscats are a topic of level 3, and it's one page. Like it's one page, and it shows up on any number of exams. So that's excellent, excellent advice. So thank you. Jody, your studying group, as you said, you met for tasting and you met for theory as well. And you mentioned that Yana set up like a study plan. How did you guys keep yourselves accountable? How did you budget your time?
Um, we were very diligent and accountable with our times because all three of us were super busy and didn't have a lot of time to dedicate. That appointment that we set with each other was sacred. Nothing comes between it. If you're setting up a 20, 30-minute appointment with your study partner, doesn't matter what's happening, you make it happen. It felt like a privilege at times if somebody else had a time and they would get on the call and they're like, this is what I'm reading and this is what I think ties in. So it might help you. We talked about maps, we talked about tastings, we talked about different regions, areas, everything in those 20, 30 minutes because it was so important. And we all three wanted to pass that.
Of
And
course, of course.
we sat for exams together too. So I think our at one point our partners knew each other well too, because they would see each other in the background quite a bit.
That's fantastic. So you had this formal studying, but you also had some informal studying. This is a picture of your office, obviously. And I loved how you mentioned that you put maps up around to identify what was in your cellar in what area. Did you have any other little like casual things that you did?
Yeah, so my son Mick is now he's 10 years old. At that time, I was 8 years old. So every morning while I had my coffee, he would practice flashcards with me. I, I would practice his math facts with him for 10 minutes. And before he went to school, he would spend 15 minutes studying flashcards with me and quizzing me on them. So that really, it started off the day on a great note for me. And I made it a point. I drive quite a bit for my work because my accounts that I see are about an hour drive from where I live. So that's two
Mhm.
hours of driving time that I have. I made it a point that those 2 hours I was completely immersed in materials that were very in sync with WSET Level 3. There are multiple YouTube videos that are out there that talk about regions, that talk about winemaking, just absorbing yourself, using your time
Yeah.
wisely, even when you're doing nothing, you're driving, listening to podcasts that was super relevant to the course. So those were just a few unorthodox things that I did in order to make sure that whatever time I had, I was utilizing to the max.
I love Mick helping you with flashcards. I have to say, Mick's a special kid, and so that's just fantastic. I can picture you guys in the kitchen in the morning doing like his homework and then doing your homework. It's a great way to mix all those things together. It's fantastic. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie and Rebecca, you both had the same experience that I did when I took my level three, goodness, 10 years ago now. Okay. And that was I needed to resit my theory. It's never fun to fail anything, but I will say for me, it was a very humbling experience, perhaps what I needed, right? But I also learned a lot from that failure, and it helped me, I think, as a human to grow. That was good, but also to better prepare me for the exam when I went to take it again. I knew they always say you never know what you don't know until you know it. And then I figured out what I needed to know. So, my question to you guys, and Charlie, I'll start with you. Would you mind talking about how you prepared for your theory the first time and what you did differently the second time?
So the first time, there really wasn't as much emphasis on the theory because I had breezed through level one, I had literally breezed through level two. So I put a lot of time in the tasting. The first time around, I put a lot of time into tasting because it was a relatively new concept, and I figured that because I was so successful for my prior theory uh, and I like academics as well. To me, I understand it, and so what ended up happening was I ran out of time on the theory portion of it. I ran out of time short written answers, and no matter how well you do on the multiple choice, if you're if you're leaving points on the table on the short written answers, if you leave them blank, you're not going to pass, and that's the sad reality that I encountered. So the second time around, I put a lot more emphasis on the short written answers, and I allocated a certain amount of time on the exam for the short written answer. So I knew, like, if you break up the exam into time segments, you,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you need a minimum of 90 minutes to successfully complete the short written answers and put less emphasis on the multiple choice.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. Just get the multiple choice out of the way. The answer's in front of you. You either know it or you don't. Like, just move
Yeah,
on so you can get to the SWAs.
yeah, and the second time around, I put a lot more emphasis on making sure I understood those chapters, making sure I took detailed notes on those chapters, and then so it's not enough to know those chapters and just really know the facts of the chapters, but now you have to apply what you're learning in those chapters throughout the different regions. And I think that the short written answers really, really helped me a great deal as far as practicing the short written answers. Probably the best thing that I did, Jess, was decided to work with you, and you really were able to help me connect things on the specifications and
Mhm.
really kind of helped me keep things focused and kept me structured on those short written answers. And just preparing for our sessions, just preparing the short written answers for our sessions, I learned a great deal both preparing and talking with you about
We were talking.
working through our questions. So
Yeah.
to me it was night and day, and as incredibly funny as it sounds, I'm thankful for that failure.
Yeah, we learn from things. So absolutely.
Absolutely.
So to unpack that, there was a couple of things. So the SWAs that you practiced, those were mostly from the level 3 skills and drills. Is that right? What was the
Yes.
online little package? Yeah, and that contains a handful, three full, not a handful, but three full practice exams. It has hundreds of short written answers that you can practice and self grade. So doing those, absolutely. You and I talked about the specification. I have one right here, right? But this little skinny green book is magic because it tells you everything that you need to know for the test. It's not the information, but it tells you all the topics, right? And so you and I spent some time with that. And then we also did our one-on-one mentoring sessions, which are available with pretty much all of our Napa Valley Wine Academy instructors. And the way you and I did this, because we didn't have to work on tasting, was I sent you some new short written answers that you hadn't seen before. And then you gave it a go, and then we came together and went through it. So it spurred that discussion as well. Those were some fun sessions, at least for me. So I enjoyed talking it out.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Same here.
Rebecca, same question to you. How did you prepare the first time and what changed?
So I agree with everything Charlie said. And the first go round for me, I did take part in the 2-day workshop that's offered post
Mm-hmm.
course, which was helpful. And I should have known at that point that I wasn't prepared because going through that, I really wasn't able to flush out those questions, those short written
Mm-hmm.
answers as adequately as I should have. So that should have been my first indication that I needed much more work with that before sitting the test. And I think I kind of rushed the finish of the course with taking the exam. So that's the one thing that I would encourage people to really consider. If you get through the end of the course and you're not feeling 100% confident, you do that 2-day workshop and you're still a little, push your test out and take some individual theory sessions with Jess or someone else that's available. And I wanted to come back and really feel like I'd mastered the material the second time instead of just squeaking by. So I went from failing the first time to passing with distinction the second time. And that's in part because I went through the skills and drills, which is something that is relatively new, an offering that gives you a huge bank of theory questions, and you just can't practice those enough. I would do those theory questions. I would have my husband give me a question, and he'd have the rubric or the point allocation, and I would time myself, write it out, hand it to him, and he'd score it. And that was a good way to see just how quickly I could get that information out of my head onto the paper. I also did more flashcards the second go round, which I want to emphasize, do them yourself. Uh, the Napa Valley Wine Academy does supply flashcards, I think, as part of the package, but I would really say do your own. There's nothing like, tactile pen to paper, doing it yourself. And then I went a step further. I got myself a little projector and I made large easel size maps. I'm very visual, and it was helpful for me to draw in all the desert and the mountain and the rain shadows and the rivers and make notes as to which grapes, red and white, grow there, factors in the vineyard, factors in the
Mhm.
winery. and just have it all there, on a large format. So that was something else that was extremely valuable. And then let's see. I think that's it. I think that's pretty much everything that I threw out at the second time, and I was happy that I did because I felt much more prepared. And when I walked out, I felt like I had, mastered it, or at least I definitely was not squeaking by.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the
Yeah.
ways that yeah, that's what we want to do, right? How you interacted with the material. Because that's like, yes, we have to read the book, but that's like step one, right? Then it's working through those questions. I love that you timed yourself. That's so important
Yeah.
as well. Charlie mentioned the temporal component on the exam. That 2 hours goes by fast, right?
It's incredibly fast. And I liked
Yes.
what he said about allowing yourself 90 minutes
Yeah.
because even that, I mean, I think I had 90 minutes and I was still writing when they said pencils down, and
Yeah.
I could have kept
Get
going.
the last
I
little
could
thought
have
on there.
kept going. Yeah. Yeah.
In our level three skills and drills with the SWAs, I think you were actually one of our beta testers with that. So you got to
Yes,
see it in
I
its
was.
infancy and help us refine it. That's awesome.
That
So
was huge. It was huge because there were questions from, all parts of the globe, but then also specific questions about process, right? And those can be, I think, even harder than the region specific questions. Especially with some like the fortified wines. That there's a lot of information there. So I think the more theory questions you can do, the better for some of the process driven questions.
so you mentioned flashcards. Okay. I have feelings about flashcards. We're talking about our assorted study tools. So quick show of hands on the panel, flashcards, yay or nay?
I like them.
A middling, yeah, and we can't see Jyoti right now, but I think she's a flashcard gal too. Um, I think that they can be really useful for that rote memorization, right? You need the fact and you need to know what it is. Like you need to define something. What is the Mediterranean climate? What is the
Yeah.
primary grape of Jumia? Like you have to have the facts, right? But we
It's kind of like
know
the
that
skeleton. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Like
And
a
then you have to fill
skeleton.
in the flesh. Yeah.
Fill in the
Yeah.
flesh. Yeah. Hmm.
Yep. And so,
Hmm.
as you mentioned, Rebecca, we do have the flashcards that are available in the level three skills and drills. So I would love to know for those of you who had that available, Jody, that was after your time, so you didn't have our level three skills and drills. So any flashcards you had, you would have made yourself. But I'd love to know if you made your own. I'm with Rebecca that I think that that's like the act of writing it down is really helpful. Or did you also use the skills and drills as a supplement? Because sometimes I know for me, when I was studying back in the day, didn't have this opportunity, but I had other flashcards that I would go through on my phone on the train and just like
Mm.
really quick, like use the time exactly as Jody said, just trying to get the time done. So what did you guys do? Did you make your own? Did you supplement with the others? Charlie, go ahead.
I did both. I made my own, and I made my own flashcards by region. But then I also used what was on the Napa Valley Academy website, and I went through those as well. And I thought that those were good drills where I could say, okay, well, I'm just gonna I'm in between meetings or something. I'm gonna take 10 minutes just to you know plow through some of these. And I
Absolutely.
thought it was excellent. I thought the content on our website was excellent.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah. And I
And
did
Ellie,
use both. I did
yeah,
use both, but um, again, like I felt like physically making them was good. And then to your all's point, if you're somewhere where you've got your phone or, you can use that much more easily sometimes than carting around a whole thing of cards. You can
yeah,
just do it digitally. Yeah.
kind
And
of
I
impractical.
did cart around a lot of cards. Yeah.
I feel you. I feel you. So, very good. Okay, so when you say what hindsight is 2020, so um, I would love to know from each of you now whether or not you had to resit. But is there anything that you wished you had done differently? And Elliot, do you mind if I start with you?
Yeah, so I think from a studying perspective, I was pretty comfortable with my approach. I'm a little bit less visual, so I relied a lot on podcasts. And so, especially as a refresher, I went through the book really quickly, you know, the first time with the course, but I kind of wish that I had done that earlier, because it gives you a really good sense of what the breadth of information you need to know walking into the test. And so had I just gone through the book prior to the course when I had some time, right? I wasn't attending classes, I wasn't trying to watch the videos and do some of the other things. I think it would have given me a much better feel in terms of where I needed to focus some of my attention. I got there in the end, but I didn't really have a ton of time during the class. To go ahead and revisit a lot of those topics. Luckily, I had about 8 weeks after the completion of my course to go back and revisit some of those things. But I would say, you get the books like 2 or 3 weeks early, or at least I did in my case,
Yeah.
which is plenty of time, right? You don't have to read it word for word, but go through, the wine regions that you're comfortable with and the grapes that you're familiar with. But understanding like, okay, what do I need to know about Greece or South Africa or like the million grapes in Italy. And it's really helpful to kind of frame what your study could look like going forward in a little bit more of a more focused manner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good stuff. Jyoti, what would you have done differently, dear? Jody, can you hear me? I think you might be on mute. Rebecca, I'm going to jump to you.
Okay, sure. So yes, I felt like the first go round, I just rushed a little bit. And then between the time I finished the coursework and the test, I didn't take enough time to go back and revisit a lot of the topics. So I would definitely just allow for more time and really get more creative with my study techniques and use everything that's available to you, because there is a lot available to you.
Yeah, lots of resources. Sometimes I almost think it's too much, but then it allows you to kind of choose your own adventure a little bit and see the area
Right.
that you need to focus on.
Yeah.
So, right. Charlie, can I jump to you?
Absolutely. Uh, Definitely, kind of echoing what Rebecca said. Really, time management is key. Knowing the chapters is key. Knowing the specifications, and really just drilling. Just always keep in mind that from a time management perspective, you can't leave anything blank on the exam. So make sure if you don't do anything, practice those short written answers. And I really think that by working with Jess, I had an unfair advantage because no, I really feel that way because of her insight and just the our first session together, when we were looking at the specification and you were just pointing different areas. So, hey, you don't have to go down this rabbit hole. Just make sure that you understand this content over here and draw upon that over there. And it could be, you know, uh, it could be from a region perspective, it could apply to multiple regions, if not all of them.
So we actually have a question related to that, so I'll address it now while we're talking about it. But the question was, with the information that you learned during our one-on-one sessions, was it on content learning or learning technique as related to the exam? I would say we kind of went through both, because it was the content, yes, but it was also how to get it on the page, right?
I'm gonna say both, Jess. I'm
Okay.
gonna say both. Yeah, and as far as there are certain things and there are certain factors and ideas and concepts that I understood, but guess what? If I don't know how to answer that question, and I felt like at times, you were the link for helping me to answer the question correctly, even though I knew the content, but you were able to kind of say, all right,
Yeah.
so what about that? What about,
Yeah.
yeah,
True fact. But what does this actually
right,
mean, right? How
right.
do we connect it all? So very good. Very good. All right. I think we have Jody back. Maybe. And the question I was posing was if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
I would not do this course during COVID. That would be.
Okay, that's one. Very good, very good.
Um, but the second would be to. I was serious about the time factor. I think I would dedicate more time to writing down the short written answer questions and handwriting down all the flashcards. I wrote some of them, but since I was on the go so much, I used all the apps and resources that were available on the internet to help me out because I didn't have as much time as I thought I needed for the program.
Sure, sure. So I completely understand that factor. Life gets in the way of wine school, as we say, right? Um, so I would like to ask one or two more questions, and I think we'll jump over to the questions we have from our audience. But as far as next steps, I think, Elliot, you might be the only one right now who is in diploma. Um, what units are you on right now? Do you feel like so far in your diploma journey that level three prepared you well? Do you feel, and it's a jump, of course it's a jump, and things are different, more complicated, and more detailed, but do you feel like the foundation that you got here was helpful? I guess is my question.
Yeah, so I've completed D1. I've taken the exam. I have not gotten my results back, so I maybe can't fully answer that question. I'll have to see if I I will say that, you know, D or the level three has all of the concepts that you need to move forward with the diploma. And so, definitely more time intensive. I think probably for D1, I spent more time preparing for that exam than I did for level three as a whole. There's just a lot to learn and very open-ended questions.
Yeah.
I'm in D2 now. I'm taking my exam in about a month, and that's something that is
Very
almost
good.
entirely different from anything that was covered in level three. But I think in terms of um, range of areas that I wasn't really familiar with. WSET3 really gave that introduction, and with the tastings and the tasting pack, right, that was really helpful, I think, because it doesn't grow exponentially from there. You really hit all of the major regions, you hit the major grapes, and so it does provide the foundation. I am taking a lot more effort with some of the tasting things to prepare for that exam as well, knowing that it's a little bit broader
Yeah.
in structure. But I think yes, foundationally, it's everything that you need to move forward. It helps you understand again what is the scope of the areas that you're looking at. It's just a lot more detailed, and I think the expectation that you can recall a lot of detail and put a lot of detail on paper.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, D1 is viticulture vinification. So things we do cover at a broader level, not nearly detailed, but at a broader level in level three than diploma. And then D2 is the business of wine. So things that we don't touch on nearly as much in three. So for the other folks on the call, are any of you planning on diploma? Is it in the future? Maybe.
Yeah,
Go
to
ahead.
be honest with you, I will. I work for a beer and wine distributor, so I'm thinking of doing a sister-on program in the
Hmm.
next year or so that that's more relevant to my industry. And then once that's done, the next step for me is to go into diploma program. But it's definitely on the horizon. I just needed a little bit of break before I walked
Oh,
into
for
it.
sure. Understandably so, and a well-earned break at that. Rebecca, how about you? Do you have aspirational diploma things?
I do have aspirations. I too needed a break, some big life things happening, but I do always feel at a loss if I'm not taking some kind of class. So it's on the horizon. I may be this fall taking a class in wine, like winemaking at a community college, because I'm hoping to actually make wine. So I'm kind of weighing and measuring diploma versus, some more like really hands-on viticulture type
Yeah.
classes. But it's a very big interest to me, and I'm definitely going to be asking a lot of questions before I jump into it, into
Cool.
diploma. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I hope to possibly next year start D1.
Very cool. Very cool. And Charlie, I think you're our true hobbyist with this. Are there diploma things on the horizon, or are you happy with level 3 for now?
Well, happy with level 3 for now. I am taking an Oregon wine expert course through the Napa Valley Wine Academy. And I figure after level 3, that's kind of, I view that as a good, fun way to kind of wind down, maybe take some of these expert classes
Mhm.
and, and maybe kind of get back in the groove. I do have aspirations of starting diploma. I don't know when that is. The timing would have to be right for me to make that significant time commitment.
Oh, for
So
sure. For sure.
yeah,
Well, the good news is that it's there for you whenever you want it, right? Pick it up.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
And you never really stop learning either. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I know personally, I feel like a lifelong student, and that's one of the amazing and yet humbling things about wine is that we know we're never going to know everything. There's just too much to
Hmm.
know, right? So we can always
Hmm.
be learning something. And then when you feel like you learned it all, something changed, right? There's a new law, a new appellation, new grapes, all those fun things. So
Climate.
climate, yes, that is changing. I heard a rumor. I heard a rumor.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a handful of questions coming in on Zoom. Um, let's see. For those of you, actually, I'm going to read the question out loud here. Did you find that you made friends, study buddies in your classes, or did you branch out from that? This person is going to be doing the program online from Alaska. So may have fewer people physically, but it sounds like you guys all did your study groups kind of digital, yes?
Hmm.
Yes.
More or
Yes.
less, virtual study
Yeah.
groups. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is excellent. Next question is related to tasting. I think we have a few of those. Somebody is asking about acronyms, especially for acid, tannin, alcohol, body, etc. Personally, I've just been so brainwashed by WSET for the last 15 years that I just do it in the same exact order every single time: sweetness, acid, et cetera, et cetera. So I never used an acronym. What were you guys just using? Like literally the first letter
The
and
first
scratching
letter.
inside? Not
First
even a
letter.
mnemonic, just the first letter in that order?
Yeah. The tab.
Yeah. Tab. Okay.
It's a tab.
And
Yeah.
the whole body.
Tab.
I got you. Yep. Yep. Okay.
And Blick. And you mentioned Blick earlier. That's a good one.
Yes, Blake, how we must
Blick.
evaluate our quality. Very good. Um, let's see. In talking about tasting, in your tasting group, how did you guys structure that? Were they open label tasting? It sounds like it kind of had to be, especially if it was a virtual group because you were ordering the wines, right?
Yes.
So not
Yes.
blind
Oh,
tasting.
yes. Open label tasting, and we'd all kind of calibrate, make sure that we had the same wine, the same vintage
Yeah.
of the wine, and yeah.
Yeah. And Jody, same for you.
Yeah,
An
very
open.
much so. I would have friends who would blind taste me on wines
Mhm.
and get weird ones out. That was fun to taste.
Yeah.
Quite a humbling
So
experience.
yes, yes. I will say, in my opinion, at level 3 in particular, blind tasting is not that productive, right?
Mm.
Because we are really working on setting our benchmarks and understanding what this wine is and why, and linking it back to our theory. And so being able to identify something blind is not what it's about, right? Writing a note blind and just evaluating it, sure, but if there's the identification part to it, it's not super helpful at this juncture, in my opinion. So it's fun though.
One thing.
So the flip side to this is I work for a distributor, and every Thursday we have a morning meeting, and we taste some wines blind and we taste some open label. The theory behind tasting it blind is if you didn't know what was the cost of the wine, what the label looked like, and you just knew that what varietal it is. How much would you pay for it? And where would you place it? In the industry, that's a big question. Is it going to be an on premise placement or is it going to be an off premise placement?
Do
Will
you
it be like
feel like, yeah, do you feel like, so when we're tasting for level three, we're trying to be as objective as possible, right? And it's not about our opinions. Do you
right?
feel like the objective tasting helped you to make those evaluations at work?
Immensely, immensely. And I have notebooks upon notebooks filled with tasting notes from work, from work tastings, from hosting wine dinners, from just tasting for the class and memorizing the tasting note. It really helps when you are trying to talk about wine with someone who's a novice or
Yeah,
even in trade. People start to take you a little bit more seriously because you're coming from a place of knowledge.
absolutely. Not just reading a tech sheet.
Right,
As
right.
Yeah, there's more to it.
But we
So
provide tech sheets with the prices and stuff because that's what they use for their servers or people who are working in the
yeah,
store. But I don't use it for one-to-one interaction with the buyer. And
yeah,
that tasting portion has really, really helped in a significant way.
excellent. With there's another. Oh, Rebecca, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and I'm not trying to create more work for you and other instructors, but I remember going through a few wines and tasting them and writing descriptions and thinking, I don't even know if I'm close. So I would scan them and upload them to you and say, am I in the ballpark here? And you were gracious enough to say yes or no. And so that was an additional bit of help if I was lost and not feeling like I was really hitting the right descriptors.
Yeah,
So
it's
again, I'm
yeah.
not trying to throw more work at you.
I don't just do them for everybody, I have to say. Right? There's only so many hours in the day, but we've been having a conversation about something, and it was built into our what we were doing. So absolutely, absolutely. Always want to help where we can, where the resources allow. Um, okay, so another question about tasting groups, about when to form them and how to form them. It sounds like you guys were doing it within your cohort. And so just making friends within that class and finding people that you gelled with. You didn't try to do it ahead of the class. Is that
No,
no? Yeah.
no.
No, no. And within the class too, Yana and I, we both, all three of us gave our exam at the same time. So we were on the
Hmm.
same line that this is our deadline. This is when we have to have everything in place. We would taste together, and that became our micro group from our macro
Yeah.
group of people that signed up. The macro group had Jen, Larry, and few others. You were aware of that. That was our whole
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
Um, we did a lot of tastings with them while the class was in session, but once the class was done, you tend to converge into your core people that you're studying with because it's
Yeah.
hard to calibrate and stay in sync with a larger group, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as you were talking about, you're protecting that time to study. It's easier for three people to commit to meet at one time than it is for
Right.
10. Yeah. So that
And
that
even
just kind
like
of
in
follows. Yeah.
West Coast, East Coast, there's a lot of time difference too for everyone to be on the same time.
That is an excellent segue, because you guys are all scattered across the country. What made you choose Napa Valley Wine Academy, knowing that you would have to travel to an exam site? I know some of you guys went to Napa. Charlie, you took yours in Tampa. Elliot, I assume you took yours in New Jersey?
I took one in Denver.
Denver, sure. Okay. Yeah. But why did you choose us? Thank you for choosing us, by the way. But why did you choose us as your provider?
Yeah, I would say for me, the volume of materials that were available. And so when I did the class, skills and drills were included in the package. So you signed up for WSET 3 and you got skills and drills. I liked the structure of having the online classes plus the videos plus the online resources to go to. I don't know that there was another wine school that had it set up in that manner where you had multiple avenues to go to, depending on what really worked for you and your study habits.
That's
My
great.
friend Caitlin, they passed the exam through Napa Valley Wine Academy. They live in Napa and work for Joseph Phelps and Davies Vineyards. So they did the program. They highly recommended the program. They're like, Jyoti, if you're going to do a wine course, this is the place you want to go with. I gave level one exam in Columbus, Ohio.
Hmm.
And then level two, I did in Napa, and level three, I did in Napa.
Yeah. Yeah. So good recommendations. So and the materials. Charlie and Rebecca, was there anything else in particular that appealed to you?
I did all of mine. I started one and two were completely within COVID. And
Hmm.
then three, when I finished level three, I think there were some in person classes opening up in Napa, but it's the closest center for me that I could find, which is about 4.5 hours from where I live. So I did go to Napa for my testing. But I don't know. I think I just found it during COVID and it seemed like the content looked really strong and there were
That's
some good
great.
testimonials. So
I'm glad. I'm glad. All right. Let's see. One other exam related question, then we're kind of edging toward the end of the hour here. When did you, twofold here. When did you choose your exam date? Did you decide your exam early in the class, or did you wait until later in the class to see how you were feeling with the material and then picked your exam date? And two, how much time was there between the end of your class and the exam? Charlie, do you mind starting us off with that one?
Yeah, I enrolled in the exam at about the same time I enrolled in the class. So
Hmm.
initially, I figured, okay, it's good to have the date there, so I have a date to work towards. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to. For me, I like having that structure. I like having that date locked in, so I know that there's a definitive place, and hopefully that motivates me to study more effectively. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and also too, I thought that the workshop. I would highly recommend the workshop before and even my second time around, I did the workshop
You
again
did it again.
because yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and because I liked it and I felt like it was a learning environment, especially back when we were back in person at the Epicurean in Tampa,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
we're doing everything in person, and we could, we're in that room and we're sharing ideas and we're, just kind of sharing each other's ideas. I thought was so productive. So
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend, definitely recommend the workshop, the 2 day
And
workshop.
for those who don't know, the workshop that Charlie is referring to, Rebecca did the workshop as well. It is a 2 day virtual or in person. We do offer them in person in Tampa, and I believe in Napa, but I'd have to check the calendar. But a couple of times a year in person, but once a month. Virtually, and it's 2 days, 20 SWAs that we go through, um, 6 wines, including two done in a blind mock exam way. And it's just a nice, I don't want to call it a refresher, but it's more of a little mini boot camp about here's a question, you go try to answer it. We'll come back together, talk about what worked, what didn't. Here will be an ideal answer. And it's a lot of conversation and a lot of practicing those SWAs because that's such a key part of this. Um, as far as exam dates, would one of y'all also mind chiming in about that?
Yeah,
Maybe.
so when I decided that, okay, like 6 months, it's great. I'll give my exam 6 months after the class is done. And I was not prepared. I mentally, physically, emotionally, academically, I was not there. I had to call in and change the date. And luckily, my cohorts, Ivy and Yana, they were on board with the next date as well. And all three of us decided this is the date we are going to do. I think we did it in June of 2021, June or July, because we had our results by August. So, but I feel like if you feel you're not prepared and you need more time, take the time. Please
Yeah.
take the time and study and do what you need. There's no shame in changing the date and extending to a later time and
Yeah.
giving you exams.
I feel like it's a balancing act too, because none of us feel 100% ready. Like if you walk into that room and you're like, I got this hands down, you might be a little overconfident. Like that's how I felt the first time I took the exam and it didn't end well, right? But feeling like you have your arms wrapped around it and feeling comfortable, but not cocky or whatever, that can always be a good thing. For if a student does with us select their exam date, you can absolutely move it. If it's more than a month outside of the exam date, there's a small nominal fee to move it to cover our administrative costs for doing that. And then if it's within a month of the exam, though, this is kind of the exception. The cost to move your exam, because we've already bought it for you, already ordered the exam, the cost to move the exam is roughly the same as the cost to just take it again if you need to. So if it's like that last week and you're just feeling a little panicky, what I would always say is just give it the old college try. See what happens. Worst case scenario, you will learn from that experience, right? And then feel better about going in to take it again in the future. But I agree, Jody, if you're at your core being like, then yeah, push it off, right?
Yeah.
Just take a little bit more time. So.
And there's such a leap too in level 2 and level 3, right? Like level 2 is digestible.
Mm-hmm.
Level 3 is inhaling an elephant. It's
Yeah.
so yeah. I'm glad I did that, and it was worth it, 100%.
Very good.
And I,
No, please, Rebecca, go ahead.
so, like Charlie, I liked having the idea of the bookends, like having course, workshop, test. But I feel like that first time I probably should have pushed the test out after going through the workshop. And then the second reset or the reset, we got a puppy in March as I was studying for the test the second time around. And I wasn't sleeping. So I did pay the fee and pushed out the second go round. And I'm so glad I did. So it's money well spent. If life happens and you've got something that just crops up that you weren't expecting, by all means, there's no shame in just pushing it out a little bit further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining me this evening to talk about level 3 and all of its glory. It's really great to hear your stories and your experience and your bits of wisdom to pass on to other students who are either in the class now or thinking about it. I know we had a bunch of questions in that, maybe not a bunch, but a handful of questions that came in through our chat that we didn't get to. I apologize for that. Just trying to keep it to about an hour here. If you would still like an answer to your question, we'll absolutely give it to you. Please just reach out to support@NapaValleyWineAcademy.com and we will get back to you very promptly. Great. Well, thanks, friends. Have a
Yeah, nice
good
to
night.
hear everybody. Yeah, nice to hear your stories. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.